Hi there. Good evening, folks. Welcome to Midwest Fantasy Football, week number 11. Joining us again for the first time in a couple weeks. We got Ricky joining back, so that way we can give Aaron a week off. So anything to say before we get started?
I have a nice smelling couch, and he does not.
Yeah, well, he doesn't either. It was on the curb, and it was getting picked up today at 4 o'clock. So he probably does not have a nice smelling couch either. The skunk couch has been officially just gotten rid of, so we'll see what happens from there. All right, moving into our first matchup of the week. Lee in his cupping of the balls. Cupping my balls, Lee. Taking out Trent, deucing in La Porta, John. 166 points, really 167 to 87, which is a 80 point win? 80 point win? Yeah, 80 point win. I can do math. What do you think?
Well, I think Trent's going to soon be two shits, double deuce. So, but, anyway, let's talk about Lee first. He was led by T. Higgins, who had 32.8 points, 19 receptions, 148 yards, and a touchdown. Also, Cooper Kupp had himself a game at 28.6 points. Also, you had a good week when you have 25 points from your freaking kicker. Chris Boswell had 6 field goals. And that's the thing, is that wasn't even his best week. Boswell had a 27-point week one. So the only miscue that Lee had is he probably should have done the Akers Hunt thing a little the other way around in that, yes, thank you for showing the bench players.
Yep, zooming down here.
Yeah, probably played Akers over Hunt, but it was a close deal, probably.
Yeah, theoretically he could have moved T. Higgins up to over Garrett Wilson, benched Wilson over, and then that'd have been another 6 or 7 points. You're at 167 points. What are you complaining about? Yeah. It was a good week.
All right. Well, I would just say that Trent did have a bit of an unfortunate week. He played Derek Carr, who had a solid week, 18 points, but Sam Darnold had 22. Not something I probably would have done, but it wouldn't have mattered at the end. Mm-hmm. He had a nice bright spot in Will Dissly, who had 18 points. Also, he had Roma Dunze, who had 12.5 points before the Bears snatched defeat from the jaws of victory this week. So,
that is true.
So, it wasn't a bad week. It's just, everybody, quite honestly, everybody was pretty heavy on the buys this week. So, there was just a lot.
This particular matchup was heavy on the buys. Actually, this week is the worst bye week coming up, which is there are 6 teams on bye this week. So this is the worst bye week for the NFL this season. So it'll be more impactful this weekend. But as you noticed here, they got 2 guys on bye there. He's got one guy on bye over there. But it seems like Lee made all the right choices. Trent mostly made the right choices, but the quality of the 2 teams is completely different here.
Yeah.
The one thing that I had noted in the second tab here, which I'm sure Ricky didn't notice, is if you look at the big blowouts, this is fourth in 5 weeks for Trent that he has been on the losing end of a stomping. So if you're playing Trent, hey, normally you can expect to be a good high score. Oh, look forward at the matchup. I'm playing Trent this week, so I'm probably going to jinx that. So I think that's what I said, right?
Trent, Taco Bye, whatever.
I don't know about that, but
no.
Yeah, I'm definitely playing Trent this week, and right now we're not looking great, but heavy bye week, right? I was talking about that, so we will see what happens. I'm sure you'll bounce back this week if it's going to happen to anybody. So we'll see what happens. All right, so moving on from our biggest blowout and top score, that was both of them this week, was all in one. The next one is our closest game, which, shocker enough, here is Tom again, because that fits his name perfectly. Finally on the losing end of one of these. Chris snuck past him with Minnesota Fanboy, 90.3 to 86.2 over Tom's just going to sneak past you, failing to sneak past Chris this week.
Yeah, the actual Minnesota Fanboy gets beat by the fake Minnesota Fanboy. So, Chris was led by Jordan Love this week with 20.24 points. I do want to call out, holy shit, Taysom Hill on the bench, going into his, Wildcat days, which, again, I didn't get to see that game because it was on at the same time as the Packer game, but he had 46.2 points on Chris's bench, probably where he should have been, but a wild card to look out for, because technically you could play him in a flex, or can you not?
Yeah, you can play him in flex. You can play him at tight end. You can play him at flex. You can play him at quarterback. He is the Swiss Army knife of football. I was listening to some stats talking about I was listening to a podcast this morning, and they were talking about the greatest performances from tight ends of all time, and this breaks is like number 7, like 46 points. The most points by anybody in this century from like 2000 on is something like 52 points or something like that from Shannon Sharpe. The number 1 all-time performance and the number 2 all-time performance, probably not who you would think, Kellen Winslow Sr. from like the 80s. He had 57 points for a tight end or something crazy, and then like another 54-point day. It was nuts. So Taysom Hill, that is what he does though, right? He has games where he's got consistency, and then he just has those games where he just explodes. This is week 11. So in week 11, he scored 49 points, 46.2 points. How many points do you think he scored between week 1 through week 10?
Like 2. I didn't look, actually.
I did. I went and calculated it, and I put all the number up. He put up 51 points the first 10 weeks, and he put up 46 this week. That's the problem with Taysom Hill, is he will have those weeks where he just goes off. He had 3 rushing touchdowns, including a 75-yard rushing touchdown with 3 minutes to go in the game where the Browns defense did not properly hold contain, and he just scattered around the end zone, and away he went. So, yeah.
All right, so we didn't rip on Chris, so that's great. Yeah, he actually...
They're the first for everything.
Yeah. So he also had CMC, 14.6 points. Justin Jefferson was also a solid week with 14 points. I do need to call out Dontavian Wicks with no points.
Yeah, Dontavian Wicks has been an MIA here. That's 2 weeks in a row with 0 points from him. 3 points, 1 points. Not Christian Watson seems to be getting all the point carries again here. So tough for Wicks this week.
All right. Well, Tom actually did have a pretty solid week too, all things considered. He's led by resurging Austin Eckler with 19.96 points. He literally did all he could with what he had, because he also too was just one of those guys that had a ton of buys. And his bright spot there was also the Minnesota defense with 16 points for him. But yeah, what was his bench? I'm trying to see this again.
Yeah, no problem. So not a whole lot there. Only 5 points on the bench. I think one of the lowest scoring benches this week.
And he didn't have another tight end to put in either. Yeah, so that was because he did have an open bench spot, so he could have picked somebody up, but he did have Trey McBride on bye this week, which is why he had defaulted back to Mike Gesicki. That 0-point day probably ended up costing you this week. I mean, 5 points is 30 yards and through 2 catches. I mean, that's kind of a tight end line. Well,
so
we could talk about Terry McLaurin only scoring 2 points too. That's pretty rough.
Yeah, the Eagles did not give the very much opportunity on Thursday. I don't know if that was Thursday night. Was that Thursday night last week?
Yeah, their running back had most of the points.
I think so. I think Washington just pretty much got shut down in that game. We'll probably see more as we get into the Jaden Daniels. I'm sure that's who Nick started, and I know he lost, so probably those things correlate. So, anything else on this one?
No.
Okay. Next matchup is Scott's and Josh's Pocket Dogs rebounding after last week's loss. 162.4, taking down Derek. What the hockey? 117.1.
All right, well, Josh and Scott, led by Jared motherfucking Goff with 37.58 points, part of the Detroit rout of Jacksonville. They looked like they were having a lot of fun. So that was a great week for him. Jonathan Smith also had 28 points, and Devon Kane had 20.5 for Scott.
Achan. His name is Achan.
I'm sorry.
Devon H. He's like, this is the full into his second year.
I know.
Try to get the guy's name right. So,
dude, I read my news. You know this. So anyway, Scott, Josh had a great week. Derek, I am going what the hockey about Anthony Richardson being the bright spot of your week, because apparently he's back from the dead, but unfortunately he was on your bench. He had 28 points.
I mean, Derek had 71 points on his bench, mostly between 3 players. He called me, or sent me a text at some point. He's like, maybe I should just think of whatever I'm going to do and then flip it around to be the other side. I mean, with those 71 points, he certainly could have gotten closer. However, you still weren't catching Scott and Josh this week.
No.
Your bright spot was definitely Houston's defense last night, in which they beat the crap out of the hopeless Dallas Cowboys. I am shocked Mike McCarthy hasn't been fired yet, personally.
It's the last year of his deal. They were stressing that during their
Oh,
whole
so they're not going to fire him. They're just not
Yeah,
gonna
they're
bring
just
him
not
back.
going to bring him back,
Okay.
so they don't have to pay him any money.
I mean, they have looked absolutely awful, and not just their quarterback play, they just have not figured out how to run the ball. I don't know if they have like the worst offensive line in the league. They just can't seem to run at all, and I don't know how it went so bad from last year to this year, because they had an okay running game last year. This year, they can't do shit. So, anything else you want to highlight on this one?
Nah.
I mean, Jared Goff in that 37 points. I'm sure you called that out while I was bringing some other stats up here, but yeah, Jared Goff continues the steamroller train that he and the Lions are on. So,
Well, I mean, it doesn't hurt when you're playing Jacksonville, but they rolled this
Right.
week, so
they
there will
rolled
be
over,
more
they
about-
rolled over Jacksonville pretty hard. I think they won 52-6, and but I know Jared Goff had a down week last week. I guess there were some people out there that played the Jacksonville defense. I don't know if anybody in this league played them. I saw a stat on Reddit that said that this Jacksonville scored the worst numbers that you can score for a defense. The bottom of the number. It cannot have been worse. They had no sacks, no interceptions, most points allowed, most yards allowed. They got, I think it was -4 is what they scored. That is the worst that you can score for a defense, and they did it this week. So,
Oh, congrats, Jacksonville D.
yeah, there's another coach I can't think is going to be long for the world personally.
No.
All right, next matchup. Aaron's cousin subs Hurts Donut 147.6 over Nick's T-Bolden Girls with 91.2. Sorry, I got to give you that extra tenth of a point.
All right. Well, Quarter had another great tight end performance. Brock Bowers had 34.3 points. That I think was one of, well, obviously it's his high score for the year, but I want to say it was like really equal to like his first fewer.
I mean,
weeks.
he's been dominant. He's been, after they traded Devontae, he has been the focal point of that offense. And there's not really a whole lot slowing him down, and they have a very soft schedule going the next few weeks. So that will definitely be a benefit for Aaron trying to push for a playoff spot here in the next couple weeks.
All right, well, sorry, too many numbers. Breece Hall also had 31 points, and Jameson Williams also was getting in on the Detroit fun with 22.6 points. So, Quarter most definitely rolled over Nick, who also was hurt by some buys. He was led by Khalil Shakir with 15 points. Unfortunately, he played Josh Daniels, which was probably the right play. But
Jaden Daniels.
What the fuck?
It just says Jade on
Yeah.
here. You don't see, unless you click into the name, that it's Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
That's fine. You don't have to apologize. That's easier than the H-hand thing.
Yeah. Again, this is what happens when I read my news.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, Tua had a lot more points. I want to say like 24.
23
yeah.
and a half.
But it's probably the safer play,
Again, you lost by 54,
Yeah.
55, another 10 points from your quarterback. And you really got to keep Tua on the bench because he's kind of fragile. You don't want him to get another concussion and get hurt. So,
But both of his running backs had a solid day, even though he had quite a few people on bye. They both had 13 points. So
sure. I mean,
Kamara
the two
seems
running backs put up the 13 points, but that still didn't compete to the Breece
No.
Hall 31 point. I think the notable player here is clearly Nick having to play Pat Freiermuth for 3.5 points because he tried all week to try to get Aaron to trade him Dallas Goedert, and he wouldn't do it because he was worried about, there's a bye week coming up for Brock Bowers, or there was a bye week last week, or some sort of insurance policy. I think it actually ended up being a matter of, with the projection, if Aaron had traded Goddard to Nick, putting him into his lineup, their matchup was so originally like closely projected. Yeah, the original projection was only like a point apart. That would have bumped him over in the mental game, and he was like, well, I don't want that. Well, he won by 50-some points, and now the trade deadline is gone, so he can't even get him anyways. So, well.
So, yeah, I guess Aaron won twice this week then.
Yep. All right, Ethan's pretty good team, 139.1 over Drew's D- with 119.1.
Well, at least one San Francisco homer's winning right now.
Yeah, San Francisco struggles with Seattle. I don't really know why. They don't seem to Seattle, I guess Seattle's defense just tends to show up well against Seattle or against San Francisco.
Well, I mean, Ethan was helped by Detroit, the sun god,
the steamroller of
Amon-Ra St. Brown, 41.7
so you can pronounce that name. What, you can't get fucking Devon Achane, right? I mean, like...
Because the letters make sense. Anyway, and then David Montgomery, who is no longer languishing in Chicago, 24.5 points. He had 15 rushes, 75 yards, and a couple of touchdowns. He played the best team he could have put out there. So, yeah, there wasn't really too much... Kittle's still hurt.
Kittle was inactive. He did not play. So, should have potentially caught that. I know you were busy this weekend. Ethan closed on his new house in Albany, so he is now an official Albany resident. That happened Friday, so he was probably a wee bit distracted over the weekend trying to get moved and unpacked at his house.
Yeah.
And he could have definitely gotten Tucker Crafton for 0 points.
I knew it didn't matter. I knew it didn't matter, so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Drew actually still had a really, really solid week. Joe Burrow had 32 points for him. Josh James, 23.4. Unfortunately, Xavier Worthy on the bench with 16.8 points, but he's just so hit or miss. That's not a huge deal. So, but it was a pretty solid week again for Drew as well.
I mean, Xavier Worthy, 16, 2, -1, 13, 5. Very much a coin flip. I think he's going to be very touchdown dependent with the way his operating. I mean, look at that. So, games where he gets a touchdown, he's got double digits. He's only got one game this season where he put up double digits. He probably had a rushing touchdown. Yeah, he's only got one game. Every game where he scored a touchdown, he's in double digits. If he doesn't score a touchdown, you're getting 4 points, 5 points. Yeah. So, tough to predict his touchdown usage. I think this tight end matchup is notable here. Kyle Pitts versus George Kittle. We got a total of 1.9 points between the two of them. Two of the probably top tight ends so far this year, outside of Brock Bowers. All right. Anything else? Okay. Will's Galactic Gibbs Gang, 135.6 over Eric's 126.7. This is a little about 11-point game, 11 points and change.
Will was led by Jamar Chase with 26.5 points. I'd like to point out that that's less than half of the points that he scored last week. I did have to call that out. But Jamar Chase actually
good. If you're going to tell me my number is 50% reduced from last week, I will take that.
Also, congrats to Jamar Chase. He got his 4th 1,000-yard season this last week. So, Josh Allen also had almost 24 points in that win over Kansas City. The only thing that could have been better was to play Zach Ertz over Evan Ingram, but it's a tight end and it wasn't that many points, so it was still a really, really good week.
12 points. Okay, how about for Eric?
Quite honestly, that's probably what you are saying right now. You were led by Joe Mixon, who had 38.3 points and didn't pull out a win. I mean, you had 126 points, so this kind of hurts. Then you had Justin Herbert, again, solid week, almost 25 points. But also hampered by Mr. Kelsey being old, and you had a bye heavy week as well. So
Travis Kelsey was only 2.8 points this week. Romeo Doubs was only 2.7 points. Yeah, you could have gotten Jalen Warren into your flex or Javonte Williams, either one of those. That's what is that? From your flex from 2 points, that's a 16-point bump. That'd have been enough. Otherwise, if you had gotten Jalen Warren in, that wouldn't have been enough on its own. But to each their own, right? Close matchups, it goes that way. Putting up 126 and losing is tough. So the only thing is that you only would have beaten. There's only one team that had a lower score than that this week that actually won. Hey, that's me. So. I put up 119.2 this week and got a win over Brandon's blown call with my Detective Pikachu, 119.2 to 98.9.
Oh, I'm just proud of you for doing a proper segue.
Hey,
it's like you can learn. You can learn. All right.
He can be taught.
That's right. He can be taught.
You were led by Saquon, 36.8 points. That is his 4th time scoring 30-plus fantasy points this year. And he scored 30 in 2 of the past 3 weeks. So, yeah, he rolling. Puka also is back. 25 points for you, too, so you're not crying about that anymore. The only mistake you made, Russell Wilson being played over Bo Nix.
Yeah.
I do think that
all
current,
of the second guesses.
Yeah, I do think that the current Denver quarterback is better than the former Denver quarterback at this point.
I had not thought about that, but yeah, I suppose that is the truth. So that was the one matchup that I think I waffled. I had Bo Nix in there for a while, and then I looked at the matchups, and I really should have stuck with Bo Nix, knowing Arizona or Atlanta's. I think they were playing Atlanta, right? Bo Nix. Boop,
Yeah.
Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, versus Atlanta. Atlanta's defense has not been very good this year. I thought that might be a shootout, but I also thought that potentially the Baltimore Niners game would be a passing heavy game. But we talked earlier that
Did you mean Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Sorry.
Are those games ever like that? No, not in the
But
recently.
wait, the way that Baltimore has been going and trying to stop Derrick Henry, I didn't care how Baltimore scored. I figured Baltimore would put up a bunch of points and Pittsburgh would have to throw a bunch to try to catch up. That did not happen, and they just kept kicking freaking field goals. And so the damn field kicker had 26 points, while then your quarterback ends up with 6. So I still won. I can't be too mad, but yeah, it was not what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And also, too, I mean, Brandon had a really solid week as well. Juwan Jennings had 26 points. Lamar, 14. So, both sides of that matchup represented. The painful thing for Brandon, unfortunately, is Jerry Jeudy on the bench with 29.2. But to be fair, he did just double up his best performance of the year, so that's probably bench is where he should be at this point. So
the passing game offense in Cleveland has significantly changed with the swapping out of Deshaun Watson for Jameis Winston. That has really elevated a lot of the pass catchers in Cleveland. So a heck of a game for Jeudy. We'll see if he can keep those types of performances going here in the next couple weeks. Knowing that this is the last of the matchups, we haven't gotten into waiver wire pickups for this week. We did have a trade last week, which was between me and Tom. I swapped out Devonta Smith for Devontae Adams and Nick Chubbs. My reasoning behind that deal was I wanted to split the Devonta Smith and Saquon Barkley train because the two of them couldn't both score at the same time. That worked out well for me in week 1. I got decent numbers out of Devontae Adams. Nick Chubb still kind of looks like crap, but I mean, hopefully his knee starts feeling better. And I know Devonta Smith did not perform real well for Tom. I think he ended up on the losing train, right? He lost in a narrow game to Chris, so that would have been better for him in the long run, but it did not work out that way. So that's the end of the matchups. Just to kind of an update on some bets. There'll be a screenshot here at some point talking about our IDP bet. Scotty B continues to push out ahead. He seems to be gaining more ground. He's up by 58 now over second place, which is me. Aaron's in third, and Tom is in last by a wide margin at this point. So at least you're not sticking around so close in that one anyways. But he did win weeks this week. So, I mean, you got 45 points to the 44.5 and 44 of the other two teams. And I got last this week with 27 points because bye weeks and injuries. So fun. I'm done with my bye weeks now finally in that league. So hopefully I can start gaining some ground. Lastly, I talked about the matchups for like the playoff projections and who was going to finish last week, but I didn't actually take the screenshot and put it in the video. I forgot to do that in the editing, so I flailed around and talked about, oh, here's the video thing. Put it over Ricky's face, and here's the actual projections for this week. I did the editing and like the talking about that, but then I didn't actually put it in there. So here it is for this week. Boop. And you can see from that we've got Lee, Nick, Ethan, and all right, now I definitely have to put it over your face. We have Ethan, Lee, Nick, and Will are all pretty much locked into the playoffs. That's the top 4. The 5 seed at the moment is Eric Pope 2. He's sitting at 82% chance, and that last spot is still pretty much wide open up in the air. It's going to be a fight at the moment between myself, Aaron, and Tom. Right now, I've got the best chances of getting that, but it's not by a whole lot. It is a close one. Down at the bottom, Chris, no changes there. Chris, Derek, and Trent are all fighting for Mr. Irrelevant, I would say, or maybe avoiding the deuce. I know we've got a couple people down there that would really like to not have one of those on their name. And I'm sure Trent doesn't want one 2 years in a row. So yeah, that's week 11. Any final words?
Hold on. Visor almost done. And actually the playoffs are almost here.
Just a couple weeks, 3 weeks to go. So, all right, that's it for us. We'll see you later.
Have fun shooting deer.
Good luck. Stay safe.